The Locomotive Engineer, Part 1 of Careers of Danger and Daring. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Careers of Danger and Daring by Cleveland Moffett. The Locomotive Engineer, Part 1. How it feels to ride at night on a locomotive going 90 miles an hour. It is 8:30 p.m., any night you please, and for miles through the yards of East Chicago lights are swinging, semaphore arms are moving, men in clicking signal towers are juggling with electric buttons and pneumatic levers, target lights on 100 switches are changing from red to green, from green to red. Everything is clear, everything is all right, the Lake Shore mail is coming, with 80 tons of letters and papers in its pouches. Relays of engines and engineers have brought these messages, this news of the world, thus far on their journey. Up the Hudson they have come, and across the Empire State, and along the shores of Lake Michigan, nearly 1,000 miles in 24 hours, which is not so bad, although the hottest, maddest rush is yet to come. It is a fine thing to know the men who drive the engines on these trains. Just to see them is something, and to make them talk, if you can do it, is better business than interviewing most celebrities you have heard about. To this end I set out, one evening early in January, for the great roundhouse of the Northwestern Road that lies on the outskirts of Chicago. A strange place, surely, is this to one who approaches it unprepared, a place where yellow eyes glare out of deep shadows, where fire dragons rush at you with crunchings and snortings, where the air hisses and roars. It might be some demon menagerie there in the darkness. To this place of fears and pitfalls I came an hour or so before starting time, and here I found Dan White, one of the Northwestern crackerjacks, giving the last careful touches to Locomotive 908 before the night's hard run. In almost our first words my heart was won by something White said. I had mentioned Frank Bullard of the Burlington Road, a rival by all rights, and immediately this bluff, broad-shouldered man exclaimed, "Ah, he's a fine fellow, Bullard is, and he knows how to run an engine." White would fight Bullard at the throttle to any finish, but would speak only good words of him. "Tell me," said I, "about the great run you made the other night." From a dozen lips I had heard of White's tremendous dash from Chicago to Clinton, Iowa. "Oh, it wasn't much. We had to make the time up, and we did it. Didn't we, Fred?" This to the fireman, who nodded in assent, but said nothing. "You made a record, didn't you?" "Well, we went 138 miles in 143 minutes. That included 3 stops and 2 slowdowns. I don't know as anybody has beat that much." By dint of questioning I drew from this modest man some details of his achievement. The curve-bent stretch of 17 miles between Franklin Grove and Nelson they did in 14 minutes, and a part of this, beyond Nachusa, they took at an 80-mile pace. They covered 5 miles between Clarence and Stanwood in 3 minutes and a half, and they made 2 miles beyond Denison at over 100 miles an hour. As the mail rushed west, word was flashed ahead and crowds gathered at the stations to cheer and marvel. "There must have been 500 people on the platform at Dixon," said White, telling the story, "and they looked to me like a swarm of ants, just a black, wriggling mass, and then they were gone. We came on to a bridge there after a big reverse curve with a downgrade, and I guess no one will ever know how fast we were going, as we slammed her around one way and then slammed her around the other way. It was every bit of 90 miles an hour. You got all you wanted, didn't you, Fred?" The fireman looked up, torch in hand, and remarked, in a dry monotone, "Goin' through Dixon I said my prayers and hung on, stretched out flat. That's what I done." "Fred and I," continued White, "both got letters about the run from the superintendent. Here's mine if you like to read it." The pleasure of these two blackened men over this graciousness of the superintendent was a thing to see. For such a bit of paper, crumpled and smeared with oil, I believe they would have taken the Mississippi at a jump, engine, train, and all. Superintendent's orders, superintendent's praise, there is the beginning and end of all things for them. My first long ride on one of these splendid locomotives was with the Burlington night mail, no passengers, 590 pulling her and Frank Bullard at the throttle. It is said that the Baldwin Locomotive Works never turned out a faster engine than this 590. The man must be a giant whose head will top her driver's, and, for all her 70 tons, there is speed in every line of her. She is a young engine, too, only 4 years old, and Bullard swears he will back her in the matter of getting over rails to do anything that steel and steam can do. She's willing and gentle, sir, and easy running. You'll see in a minute. These words from Bullard, first-class engine driver of the C.B.&Q., a long, loosely jointed man, with the eye and build of a scout. As he spoke, they were coupling us to the mail cars, in preparation for the start. In overalls and sweater I had come, with typewritten authority to make the run that night. This was in the first week in January, the second time Bullard had drawn the throttle for Burlington on the new fast schedule. Burlington lay off there in Iowa on the Mississippi, with all the night and all the state of Illinois between us. Now the train stands ready. 3 mail cars and the engine, not a stick besides. No Pullman comforts here, no bunks for sleeping, no man aboard who has the right to sleep. Everything is hustle and business. Already the mail clerks are swarming at the pouches like printers on a rush edition. See those last bags swung in through the panel doors. Not even the president of the road may ride here without a permit from the government. Bullard takes up a red, smoking torch and looks 590 over. He fills her cups and prods a 2-foot oiler into her rods and bearings. Dan Cleary, the fireman, looks out of his window on the left and chews complacently. Down the track beside him, locomotive 1309 backs up, a first-class engine she, but 590 bulks over her as the king of a herd over some good, ordinary working elephant. As she stands here now, purring through her black iron throat, 590 measures 16 feet 3 inches from rails to stack top. Both engines blow out steam that rolls up in silver clouds to the electric lights. Bullard climbs up to his place at the right, and a hiss of air tells that he is testing the brakes. Under each car, 16 iron shoes close against 16 wheels and stay there. Down the length of the train goes the repairman with his kit, and makes sure that every contact is right, then pulls a rope 4 times at the rear, whereupon 4 hissing signals answer in the cab. Bullard shuts off the air. "It's all there is to stop her with," says he, "so we take no chances with it. She's got high-speed brakes on her, 590 has, 110 pounds to the inch. 24, Dan," he adds, and snaps his watch. "We start at 30." Dan chews on. "Bad wind tonight," he says. "Reg'lar gale." Bullard nods. "I know it. We're 15 minutes late, too." "Make Burlington on time?" "Got to. You hit it up and I'll skin her. 26, Dan." 4 minutes to wait. 2 station officials come up with polite inquiries. The thermometer is falling, they say, and we shall have it bitter cold over the plains. They reach up with cordial handshakes. I pull my cap down and take my stand behind Bullard. Our side of the cab is quite cut off from the fireman's side by a swelling girth of boiler, which leaves an alleyway at right and left wide enough for a man's body, and no wider. Bullard and I are in the right-hand alleyway, Bullard's back and black cap just before me. Dan, with his shovel, is out on a shaky steel shelf behind that bridges the space between engine and tender. That is where he works, poor lad. We are breathing coal dust and torch smoke and warm oil. Fsss, comes the signal, and instantly we are moving. Lights flash about us everywhere, green lights, white lights, red lights, a phantasmagoria of drugstore bottles. The tracks shine yellow far ahead. A steady pounding and jarring begins, and grows like the roar of battle. Our cab heaves with the tugging of a captive balloon. Our speed increases amazingly. We seem constantly on the point of running straight through blocks of houses, and escape only by sudden and disconcerting swayings around curves that all lead, one will vow, straight into black chasms under the dazzle. Whoever rides here for the first time feels that he is ticketed for sure destruction, understands that this plunging engine must necessarily go off the rails in 2 or 3 minutes, say 5 at the latest. For what guidance, he reasons, can any man get from a million crazy lights, and who that is human can avoid a snarl in such a tangle of bumping switches? I am free to confess, for my own part, that I found the first half hour of my ride on 590 absolutely terrifying. Thus, at breakneck speed, we come out of Chicago, all slow-going city ordinances to the contrary notwithstanding. We are chasing a transcontinental railroad schedule, and have 15 minutes to make up. I breathe more freely as we get into open country. We are going like the wind, but the track is straighter and the darkness comfortable. I begin to notice things with better understanding. As the lurches come, I brace myself against the boiler side without fear of burning. That is something learned. I find out later that I owe this protection to a 2-inch layer of asbestos. I catch a faint sound of the engine bell, and discover, to my surprise, that it has been ringing from the start. Indeed, it rings without ceasing all the way to Burlington, the rope pulled by a steam-jerking contrivance, but the roar of the engine drowns it. Deep shadows enwrap the cab, all the deeper for the glare that flashes through them every minute or two as Dan, back there on his iron shelf, stokes coal in at the red-hot door. 2 faint lights burn for the gauges, a jumping water column in front, a pair of wavering needles on the boiler. These Bullard watches coolly, and from time to time reaches back past me to turn the injector cock, whereupon steam hisses by my head. For the most part he is quite still, like an Indian pilot, head forward at the lookout window, right hand down by the air brake valve, left hand across the throttle lever, with only a second's jump to the reversing lever that rises up from the floor straight before him. As we race into towns and roar through them, he sounds the chime whistle, making its deep voice challenge the darkness. At curves he eases her with the brakes, and for grades and level stretches and bridges he notches the throttle up or down as the need is. Watch his big, strong grip on the polished handles. Think of the hours he spends here all alone, this man who holds life and death in his quick, sure judgment. Now he catches the window frame and slides it open. A blast sweeps in like an Arctic hurricane. Bullard leans out into the night and seems to listen. "Try it," he cries, but his voice is faint. I put my head out and come into a rush of air billows that strangle like breakers. "Greg's Hill, 3 miles long. Let her go soon." He closes the window. And now, as we clear the grade, begins a burst of speed that makes the rest of small account. Faster and faster we go, until the very iron seems alive and straining underneath us. I am tossed about in hard pitches. The glow of the furnace lights up continuously. There is no sense of fear any longer. It is too splendid, what we are doing. Of course, it means instant death if anything breaks. Let the massive side rod that holds the 2 drivers snap, and a half-ton knife sweeping 70 miles an hour will slice off our cab and take us with it like a cut of cheese. Did not an engineer go to his death that way only last week on the Union Pacific run? After all, why not this death as well as any other? Have we not valves and tubes in our bodies that may snap at any moment? How fast? I call out. 80 miles an hour, says Bullard close to my ear, and a moment later pulls the rope for a grade crossing. Woo, 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 answers the deep iron voice, two long and two short calls as the code requires. Year ago, killed 2 men here, he shouts as we whiz over the road. Struck buggy through men 60 feet. I wonder how far we would throw them now. In the 206 miles run to the Mississippi we stop only once, for water at Mendota and at Galesburg. 9 minutes wasted for the two, and the gale blowing harder. Our schedule makes allowance for no stops. Every moment from our actual going is so much dead time that must be fought for, second by second, and made up. Drive her as he will, with all the cunning of his hand, Bullard can score but small gains against the wind. And some of those he loses. At Mendota we have made up 7 minutes, but we pull out 13 minutes late. At Princeton we are 15 minutes late, at Galva 14 minutes, at Galesburg 8 minutes, but we pull out 12 minutes late. Then we make the last 43 miles, including bridges, towns, grades, and curves, in 44 minutes, and draw into Burlington at 1:22 a.m., on time to the dot. This because Bullard had sworn to do it. Also because the road beyond Galesburg runs west instead of southwest, and it is easier for a train to bore straight through a gale head on than to take it from the quarter. We took the big, steady curve at Princeton, a downgrade helping us, at 100 miles an hour. So Bullard declares, and what he says about engine driving I believe. Indeed, these great bursts can be measured only by the subtle senses of an expert, since no registering instrument has been devised to make a reliable record. Across the twin high bridges that span the Bureau Creeks we shot with a rush that left the reverberations far back in the night like two short barks. And just as we rounded a curve before these bridges, I saw a black face peering down from the boiler top, while a voice called out, "War! War! War! War!" To which startling apparition Bullard, undisturbed, replied, "War! War! War! War!" Then the head disappeared. Dan, from his side, was telling Bullard that he had seen the safety light for the bridges, and Bullard was answering something about hitting it up harder. How these men understand each other in such tumult is a mystery to one with ordinary hearing, but somehow they manage it. Halfway between Kewanee and Galva a white light suddenly came into view far ahead. I knew it for the headlight of a locomotive coming toward us on the parallel track. Already we had met 2 or 3 trains, and swept past them with a smashing of sound and air. But this headlight seemed different from the others, paler in its luster, not so steady in its glare. The ordinary locomotive comes at you with a calm, staring yellow eye that grows until it gets to be a huge full moon, but it comes gradually, without much jumping or wavering. This light danced and flashed like a great white diamond. I watched it with a certain fascination, and as it came nearer and nearer, realized that here was a train of a different kind from the others, coming down on us at terrific speed. And Bullard shouted, "Number 8, with the mail," then added, as the train passed like the gleam of a knife, "She's going, too." End of The Locomotive Engineer, Part 1.